for the session this evening. So welcome everyone to our Technorama Tuesday. My name is Jordana. I'm from the Community Media Training Organisation, and it's great to have your company this evening. Wonderful to see so many people in the room. Just another shout out, we've got Richard from Living Arts in Canberra. So a whole bunch of people in the room. We've got about 13 people joining us this evening. So the session tonight is Station Automation Part 2. So some of you may have joined us for Part 1, and this one is getting a little bit more deep and technical, and we're going to be really encouraging you to send us your curly questions throughout this evening because we have some experts on the line. So anything that you want to ask about station automation, throw it into the Q&A box or pop it up in the chat, and I'll track those as we go along and make sure that those questions get answered. So with us this evening we have Peter Gill, who is one of our CMTO trainers, very experienced broadcaster, very experienced in the technical side of stations as well, and has worked with automation for a very, very long time. So we're very privileged to have Peter Gill with us this evening. He is calling in from Cairns, and he works at Coast FM up in Cairns doing work at the station up there. And we also, of course, have John Maisels from Technorama joining us this evening. John Maisels is the president of Technorama, and he also has expertise in this area, so he'll be facilitating the session and throwing questions at Peter Gill as we go along. The session tonight, of course, is supported by the Community Media Training Organisation, so if there's anything that piques your interest tonight and you think, I need more training on that, get in touch with us at the CMTO. You can jump onto our Facebook page and send us a message, or find our details online, or just send me an email. I'll pop my email up there. At the moment, we are looking at training applications opening in April for CMTO training, and we have some great offerings for technical training in this round coming up. In particular, we'll be offering some tech blitzes at stations. So those are intensive 2-day sessions where you get to go into a station with a whole bunch of people and basically pull it apart and put it back together while learning a whole bunch of technical stuff at the same time. We also have our wonderful Station Tech for the non-technical, a great course if you are the technician at your station and you need to get some messages through to your station management, or if you're station management and you really need to help try and understand what's going on in the technical respects of your station. So those are some offerings that we'll have coming up in that round. So if you haven't signed up to the CMTO newsletter, jump onto our website, cmto.org.au, which is currently down, so check tomorrow, and sign up to our newsletter for that, or jump on Facebook and shoot us a message and we'll add you. Also, keep in mind that the Community Broadcasting Foundation grants are open at the moment. Some of you may be applying for some of those. If you are actually going to be including training in your grant application, perhaps you're going to be putting it into your general grants or your content grants, get in touch with us at the CMTO. We'd love to do a letter of support for you or enter into a memorandum of understanding to help you out with the training. We can provide quotes and those sorts of things as well for your grant applications. So if that's something you have in mind, please get in touch with us as well. All right, so I'm going to hand it over to John to take over now, and then Peter, and they'll be sharing their screens and showing you through all the features of all the different station automation software we're going to be covering tonight. So keep the questions coming. Thanks very much. So over to you guys.
Thanks, Geordie, and welcome everybody. So automation, why do you have it? Many reasons to make life easier, to speed the process between doing some production and getting it on air, to make your station sound smoother, to ensure that things are played. There are many reasons to have station automation, but I think pretty much all stations these days will have some level of technology supporting presenters. And of course, the important thing is that station automation is going to assist the operation, not dictate how it works. But if you're not careful, that's exactly what can happen. And your choice of station automation tool, which might be dictated by all kinds of things, either the shiniest thing with the most bells and whistles down to the cheapest that can possibly be afforded, will then translate into changes in how the system is used and how people use it, and ultimately whether or not they are actually happy or not. So looking at station automation as an art form, Peter and I have been talking over many, many years. And by the way, Peter and I met, it'll probably be 15 years ago, at a community radio station where we were implementing a very, very sophisticated whole of station automation system that was just amazing. We might talk a bit about that later. But we learned lots and lots of lessons. Now, you know, these days, Peter's in one place, I'm in another. Doesn't stop us from still looking at some of the lessons that we learned and thinking about, well, what makes automation work better for a station? What makes it work less good? And at the end of the day, the important thing about automation is that the listener should not perceive that the station is automated, ever. That there are tools or there are things happening. Ideally, a listener should not know that your station is running on full automation or partial automation or no automation at all. It's there to do a job and support the station and support you in communicating with your listeners. Now, there are many different types of automation. Geordie, Peter and I just went through a quick rundown of some of the automation systems that the three of us have used, and it included, and I'll sort of run through these quickly, a station playlist, Zara, Simeon, M Airlist, Reduga, Radio Man, and then we've seen some of the more high-end ones that we haven't used, but we know about, like NextGen and Dalet and Enco, and the granddaddy of them all, the one that I think is Master Control, and help me, Peter, I've forgotten the name of the people who produce it.
Is that the RCS cabinet? I'm not sure.
Yes, thank you. Which is probably installed in more radio stations worldwide than any other system. But all systems really try to do the same thing. So in today's session, what we're going to do is look at a range of things about automation, from how might you use it, and we're going to try and show you some tools and some tips and tricks that will make a system work better for you. And we'll also talk about some of the things that you might do as part of implementation that you might consider, like networks and like storage and backups and other things that are back-end technical that will, again, make the system work better or not so better for you. So questions, just pop them in, either pop your hand up, pop the question in the question box or in the chat box. So while Peter is talking, I'll be attempting to manage the questions. We'll be throwing it open as we get towards the end. We've got until 7:30 Eastern time, or until one of two things happens. You stop asking questions or Geordie comes and shuts us down. We'll keep going for as long as we possibly can, and it makes sense. So to kick things off, Peter, take it away.
Thanks, John. Let's change screens over here and I'll be right with you. I want to bring up this one. I'm going to share this one. That's what I said, isn't it?
That's it. Yep.
Yep. And I'm going to bring, I get this one across to here.
Nothing takes the place of preparation. So tonight we're using the technique called nothing. Just while Peter's doing that, I might just mention that probably, at the end of this session, I'll give you a quick update on, I'll turn my camera back on. So I'll give you a quick update on what's happening with Technorama 19. Write the dates down in your diary right now. It will run from the 3rd to the 5th of May. It's in Campbelltown, New South Wales, so an hour's train ride from the airport in Sydney. And it's everything you've come to expect from a Technorama. Great time, really cheap, food, everything else provided. And this year on Friday, we're running a full day of training. So it's the Friday Education Day. And this year's Education Day is project planning and project management. And we'll be taking the class through formal aspects of how you do project management, how you do project planning in the hands of one of the sector's most qualified project managers, Julie Spencer. More information will be appearing on the Technorama website, and well, I hope to have a little announcement for you by the end of this session. Okay, Pete, how are you going?
I've got you on the screen at the moment. Is that what everybody can see?
Oh, everybody can, yes. So you probably want to hit the share button and off you go.
Share, is that one?
Which will share your screen.
My screen. Okay, that's what's not going up again. So to try we share
I'd love
that
to be able
one.
to reach out and help Pete do this. And there we go. I will now go away.
Okay. What we did last time, and there are a few people who have joined us for this one without the background of what we did. Radio, these days, we have to look at computers being able to say what they do rather than them being the enemy, the thing that controls your whole life and takes over. And we have this huge problem amongst people who have been using automation for a long time, who get a change in systems. We're dealing with one of those at the moment to try and help. There are people who have been manually using cartridges for years, been able to use turntables even, and all of a sudden there's a computer there and they fear it. So what we need to do is to get through that barrier and be able to say, what can computers do for you and how can they help? So they become your electronic helper. In most cases, convince the people that they are your panel operator. They are there for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to be able to help you play and work with things. One of the main things here that we look at is that you can now use it to be flexible in your work situation. You don't have to worry about your program that much because it now is set up for you, and you will be able to do that, and we're going to do that in just a moment, so that you can start later if you like. If you don't get there in time because of a traffic jam or some appointment that you may have, the computer system that you've already set up for your own show will be able to commence the program, and you will be able to turn around and take over. This was done some time ago, as I said in the last one, last of our webinars, the fact that Ian McRae at the 2SM wanted to start later in the morning, didn't want a 5 o'clock start. So he was using automation till 6 and then went live at that point. Also, you can leave earlier. Maybe you have a family appointment or something that's required. You can record ahead in what we call voice tracking, and we'll try and show you that in a practical way today too. Being able to plan ahead, often people who are doing programs, they like time while the tracks are playing or while a recorded program is actually running or an interview, to be able to use that time to be able to do further planning. It was used years and years ago to be able to record interviews while people were actually on air, edit them and put them together. This can now be done fully with the current automation systems. Now, the program managers, they have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to worry about. The usual problem is that somebody gets sick, somebody leaves the station, or somebody at one time will be having problems of being able to complete the programs that they had. By using automation and setting up the particular schedules that you have, you will be able to guarantee that the people who are listening to your program have the same sort of music that you've set in that time. Maybe you have a country program at 4 o'clock one day. You can set up that so a country program will run. It may not be with the same people or the same atmosphere, but you can guarantee that you can produce that for your particular listening audiences. The program will fit the content. Every time you'll be able to work with that, so that therefore it will fit your format. You can turn around and use these programs to move schedules around. And we'll be showing you that in very, very few moments. Illnesses and holidays can be covered. It's very difficult with people with their family lives, their volunteers, and they're presenting your programs, so they must have that flexibility. If you turn around and cut that flexibility back, then there's always a problem as far as you're working. Now, let's look at the basics. Let's go right back to the very basic idea of a clock, so that most people will in some way turn around and plan out their program. If it's a talk program, they'll have an interesting interview at the start of it, a lead into it to be able to summarize what they're doing. They'll be able to have probably one of the best interviews early and another really good one later to be able to maintain a listening audience. Music programs, you might turn around and play a top 40 track first to be able to work on your audience and grab them, and then follow it up with something else. In this case, what I've done is we're going to put together, and I find this is the easiest way for people to be able to work with me, in other words, to be able to put together a program which is 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. So literally all we've done here is we've worked out the clock that we're going to work with. Now what I need to do is to actually bring up the program on this screen. So we'll get rid of that, and we'll bring the program itself up. Hope that's the right screen for everybody. Now, usually we look at your directories. So this will be the directory on your machine. This is the simplest way for you to be able to tell your staff and yourself to be able to set up how you're going to run the automation system.
Peter, we're still seeing just the PowerPoint presentation at the moment.
Oh, okay. So we need to do a share trip, a new share, and we need that one. So you should now have Explorer?
Yep, that's it.
Okay, that's great. Now, anybody who is doing a program normally lays it out in some way. There are the people who will come in and just play whatever they want and do this from week to week. But there are people who will plan their program. They will turn around and say, I need certain types of tracks in each program at a certain time. And if I'm going to be on the air for a long time, for a period of 3 or 4 months, I need to be able to have the continuity in what I'm doing. Now, that, as I said, it applies to as much to program managers as it also applies openly to the announcers themselves doing their own shifts. So in here, if this was your machine at home, you would have found a selection of 60s tracks, a selection of 70s, and so forth. To be able to have variation in the hours, I've thrown in a few love songs, and these are all number ones. They're from various eras rather than from all of those ones, though. So that's the very first stage, is to plan it at home. That really isn't all that difficult. Transfer your CDs across, your downloaded files that you have onto a card to be able to take it in and be able to put it into the system. This is fairly easy and fairly logical for everyone that you're working with. Okay, now we should go to this screen. What one can you see now, Georgie? Is that playlist?
At the moment, I'm seeing still your Explorer.
Okay, so we need to go across to this one here. I'll learn how to use this by the end of the day.
There we go, got it now.
Now, this is the basis of most of the automation systems. In each case, you give them the material you need. Here we've got the categories. So we'll turn around and create the categories that we need, these 4 categories, which will only take us a few moments to actually do. So we've got our 60s. At home, you've already created the folder, or you've done it in the work situation. So we go through and we find the folder and add it to the system. So now we have all the 60s into the database, and most of them have some form of database as the back end for them. So I'll just add these very quickly so I can show you the full hour and how it can be done so very easily. So now we'll go back into the 70s, obviously after that into the 80s. By doing this, I'm trying to show you how easy it is, and therefore we can use these principles to be able to work it out into other systems. I was able to do this, I think, in 3 days for an entire radio station, which I did, and that would have been Yapoon, but that goes back a few years now. Add the folders.
And this general setup is fairly similar across most platforms, Peter?
It varies in how it's done. For example, I was working with Zara, because I've got a station that's interested in that one. They have folders that you actually connect to the main file, but the principle is exactly the same as to how they're actually put into them and how they're rotated. I'll just add these last 2 and then we're away. And from there, you'll be able to see how quickly and how easily we can actually do these things.
The critical message, of course, is that the tool should serve you rather than the other way around. And what Peter is going through is the process that will take your programming concept and force the tool to deliver on the programming concept rather than slavishly following how the tool might be set up.
Exactly. So now you've got different categories, and you realize you can do that with slow music, with classical, with jazz, whatever you decide that you're going to run. Every one of those you can have a folder for. Basically, it's unlimited in all of the systems. The systems work only slightly in the background, but you will wind up with a data file of some kind that has all of the categories that you'd like to work with. Now, what we're going to do is a simple stage. We looked at the rotations. So in here, does that one show as well or not?
At the moment, we've just got, coming up, basic rotation properties.
That's exactly what we needed. That's fine. In here, obviously, we've said, okay, we want to turn around to a 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. We're getting close to about the 20 past, so let's put a love song in at 20 past. You can see how quickly you can actually assemble. What do we have, 60? So that one I should have made as a 70s and 80s. Up the top here on this one, it shows you where you're up to in the hour so that you can then place whatever you want in there. 60, 70. So now what we've done is we've taken the clock around and put it into 1 hour. So this is a planned hour, which could be your show or a radio show for the station itself that they do over a period of time. So we'll quickly turn that round and make it into, I'll bring over this one. So I'm assuming that that can be seen as well.
Yep.
Oh, great. Okay, now in here, it's default. So therefore, there is no program in those. So let's say that this basic one we have just created, we want to run at, say, 4 o'clock on these days, or we could say just one day if wished. So now all we do is transfer the one across. That would then create the 1 hour, and we can do that quite easily. So let's bring this up for today. A time, we'll select as 13, 15 is there, and we'll just do 1 day's worth. And now it goes through and works out those for us. Up here, we will be, oh, will this one come up? Can you see that output or not?
Editor? No, we can't see it.
Playlist, okay. New share. And bring up that one. You got that now? That's the playlist editor?
Yep.
Okay. Now you can see the hour has already been created, and it's gone through and it's selected one song out of each one of those categories. So now you have the rotation that you wanted, your program laid out exactly the way you wanted it to, and it's gone through and it's selected one song out of each one of those categories to build up your day schedule. Now, I hope I can get back to that other screen again, because I want to get back to the planning one.
Did it just select them randomly, Peter?
No, it doesn't, not with this program, but this is where John and I are sort of saying all the systems are different. With this one, it goes through and it actually does a shuffle of the material and sets up a new listing number from top to bottom. It also does, John, where should we do this or just do the basics for a start, do you think?
Let's quickly go through basics.
Okay, yeah.
Every system will present differently. Every system will give you different information, and every system will have either subtle or possibly dramatic differences about how the material is stored. So this one, for example, appears to have the track name embedded in the file name, but not all systems do that. Many systems, the metadata that describes the track name and the length and where the vocal starts and all that is only in the database and never associated with the physical music file.
Yes, it does. There is a background area in it, but we'll go into that afterwards for you, which is the separation that Geordie just asked about. So now we've got this rotation. Can you see this is basic rotation properties? Is that what you've got on the screens?
Yep.
Okay. Now let's say in here that you wanted to turn around in this one format. You've got this 1 hour in the entire week. You wanted to turn around and add some material to it. So let's say that you really wanted to put a jingle in there, a sweeper for your radio station. So you can select where you would like that to be. So we're now moving to the next stage.
Sorry, Peter. I think we
Yep.
might have new schedule properties rather than.
Yep, it looks like you're frozen again.
Okay, so we find this main screen. Let's try this one in. What have you got there now?
Yep.
Basic
rotation.
That's it. Okay. And if I click in there, it stays put?
Yep.
Okay. Now you might want to run a community service announcement. So you can now turn around and place that into your system. Then we've got, this is a finance company that we have as a sponsor. So again, we can place that into the system. So when we generate this music schedule that you saw, it will go through and pick up one of our 40 or 39 jingles in this case. It'll go through and pick up a suicide community announcement. That's one of the 20 that we're running at the moment. The finance ones it'll run, so that each one of those will then be selected the same way as it does with the music and inserts these into each hour. So therefore, we now have a very workable situation. So if we go back into the schedules, now which are you seeing? New schedule properties or not?
Nope, still on basic rotation.
Okay, cool. We go across to new schedule properties then, which looks like that. You got that now, new schedule properties?
Yep.
Okay, so here you can see that the original default and the one that we placed in is basic. Now let's say your radio station is 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s. So that's your policy that you're actually going to run with. So this is basic, and with this one, we can click the one button and there's your 24 hours filled straight off. You've also got the days of the week on which you would like them to be. So you can have various ones for your Sundays, your Mondays, or whatever else. But we have now created, quite literally, and we'll go ahead and do that. I'll probably have to change screens again. So if we go into today, we do 2 days and a start. It's now generating it. Which screen have you got there? Is it playlist creation?
Not yet. We've still got new schedule properties.
Okay, well, I've just run that one. Now, if I go across here to that one, I hope. Is this one now showing like the output schedule?
Yep.
Okay, so now you see what we've got is that music rotation we already set up. And in there, we're now putting the station material into there as well. So this is the Tuesday one. We can simply move forward to the next hour. And in each case, they've already been rotated and moved around to be suitable. In this screen, you can turn around and make changes. So that maybe that's what you've done. You go in late one day, but you have some new tracks. You make those changes in this screen. So you can make changes at the very last minute. And in each one of these sections here, you can also change the adverts afterwards and run the program again. But now we have a program that is 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, that is running this format. It's pretty obvious that you can turn around and make other formats to be able to come back into these particular ones. Now what we can look at is the overall. There are different ways in which the program actually works. So you've got a player program. You've got one that generates the schedules, and you've got one that generates the music. That's pretty much similar in every system in some way or another. When it's run for the initial system, at that stage, it then becomes possible to be able to generate an entire program merging all of those files. But at other times, you can have a variation, bring things in at a later time. But let's get out of that one and go back and show you how that is done in the long run. So now I need the schedules. So I need to show you this one. So that should be new schedule properties?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Now, as we've seen here, each one of these is now containing the music, and it's containing whatever you want to add to it. That can be a jingle, a sweeper, commercials, but any kind. So you've now built them into those programs. The better way of doing this is, because you have separate schedules, is to turn around and put in whatever you need. So in here, we've got a spot group. We'd like that to run at in the first hour at 1:15. We can pick up the Astute Finance product, and that one, therefore, can be added to timed events because I haven't less break. Next play. I don't have a minute in there. Okay. So now it's added it over here. It will play it as close as it can possibly do to the time. In this case, you can allow a bit of leeway, so it'll let the music track finish, or it'll move it forward if the whole of the programming is running that way. In here, you can build an entire day's programming or a schedule that can run all the way through. By using this as a separate way to bring back in commercials and material that will change from day to day, you can then update your material after you've done your music schedule. And the music schedule can be then edited by anybody who wishes to. Have we got any questions at this stage before we can go on to sort of more developing things?
Nothing in the chat box at this point. If anyone's got a question, pop it into the chat box or into the Q&A. Really happy to go on, but this looks like we've covered the basics now.
I'm trying to make it as simple as I can. It's just so much easier to running these programs this way. Now, the screen I want is the editor. Is that not the one you've got?
Yep, we've got the editor.
Got the editor there. It's great. Now, this is a program that has already been made up for the week. The thing is that many people will turn around and spend hours recording the entire program in case somebody doesn't show up, doing a background program like that. This is not necessary. The music, you know, the music is for the listener in every possible way. What you're doing is putting the bits in between to be able to tell them about the music or about some kind of event that might occur. So there's no need these days to be able to spend that amount of time, like an hour recording a program, when you can do most of it in 15 minutes, as long as you've got most of your scripts ready to be able to do it. So let's say we want to back announce Renee Gayer. So in here we can click. Then by simply voice track. Now I'm not sure what screen you'll have up here.
What have we got? We've got something coming up. We've got voice tracking, little box saying voice tracking.
That's great. That's what we want.
And then
okay, and
VT
here
recorder.
what it's doing is a voice track that you want to put in at that particular spot. So that now you can use this module which he's got. Now remember, every system can do this. Even some of the cheaper ones now, absolutely, this is a feature of the kind of program you're working with. So go and try it, work with it. So we can play the back end of a music track, and we can then start recording our voice track over that. So when I actually save this, in there the voice track has already been inserted. Can you see that on the screen?
Yep, it's come up. And did you record that voice track in the studio?
I can do that. I didn't record it here today, but I can, yes. It's that simple. You can do it in a live program when you're actually working with the program itself to air. You can do voice tracks so that you can be up to maybe what we used to do at 4CA, for example, when I was panel operating there, they go into outside broadcasts on the weekends. We'd get to a point of maybe a half hour before the finish of the OB. There was nobody in the store, so the crew wanted to go home. So we would voice track the last 2 or 3 breaks in there, and we could pack up and disappear quite early. So that gave us that advantage of being able to leave and work under those circumstances. But here, you can do it to be able to do it for yourself within programs. I normally do 7 days ahead for the staff, and they can come in then and do voice tracks here. They can change the music. It's simply a drag and drop into this particular screen to be able to do that. But because of these red things, I can turn around and change the jingles and community services after they've done their voice tracks and after the music has been in the system. These voice tracks and this one can be timed so that that will go over the ramp on the music, continue with the music leading up to the vocals or to a solo. It can go over it the same way as you would do it in the live situation in the studio. So that makes it exceptionally flexible to be able to do that. You can put in introductions to tracks and features as well by doing that simply as voice work, either on air or in a pre-situation before the on-air situation comes about. Another feature now that is being used a lot with stations is the linking system. Now in here, let's say that you have a library of material. And so we'll pick up at this stage 60 songs. We haven't set up a voice track intro. But what you can do is you can bring up all of the 60 songs, select one of the songs, and record an introduction for it or a close. So let's say it's Hank Williams, for example. You can do an opener for Hank Williams so that every time a Hank Williams song comes up in your playlist, it will then turn around and have an announcement by one of your local announcers with your station ID and the fact it's a Hank Williams song. You can take a new song and you can put this onto a single song so that every song that time that song comes up, it will also link. You can put that into the formats in such a way that you can stop them for night times or have them running for daytime, whatever you wish, to be able to make that kind of variation. And these are the areas where I got queried last time about how do you make it sound live? Because you're back announcing a song that is currently going to air, it sounds as though the announcer is in the station and paying attention to what's been played. The things like the weather forecast, they can be brought in later as well into already pre-recorded program so that you may record normally an hour. You can't turn around and go back, put the weather into it, a traffic information or a competition thing. With this sort of system, you can. It can. Once those things arrive, you simply go in and place those. Everything else gets moved within the schedule automatically for you to be able to make that happen. Any questions at this stage? How are we going?
Nothing coming up in the chat box, but we do have a comment from Russell, who's at the senior station, and he says we run 2 or 3 hour program sessions, each a different format with separate weekday and weekend formats.
Mm-hmm.
Using Jazzler automation running 24 hours a day, but only to air overnight, but with a format regime during the live presenter days and evenings that matches the live presenter formats. Thus, it is an immediate to-air backup for the presenter in the case of a CD or turntable hiccup with silence to air overcome.
Absolutely. We with Jazzler was I used a Triple H. I forgot about that one.
Yeah.
Hornsby, but that's been around for a long time and it's very reliable.
And the other question I had, I mean, you made so much sense to me, Peter, when you just put together an hour-long program there, and I usually go in and record my programs at 2RRR, track by track. If lots of people bring their own laptops into studios now, and I've got a Mac. Any suggestions or any recommendations for playout software on using a Mac?
I'm not sure. I think that there was one of the ones I struck did have that availability to it. I can't remember which one it was though, because it's a rare thing. Yes.
Okay. Well, maybe that's some research for me to do and put up a bit of a list in the tech Q&A.
All right. Now we can look at the separation rules because we've now sort of covered the basis of those. With the categories of music, again, which screen are we on?
I can see station playlist creator.
That's it. Right. We're in business. Now, with each one of these, as you realise, these are simply folders containing whatever music, the same way as you would do all of the other systems to be able to work with those. Within each one of these, there's a whole series of options. And this is where you start to move away from simply putting a music track in or not. In here, you've got song separation. That's usually the file name, the one that you would see within Windows. And you can say that you don't want that to be heard less than, say, 8 hours, let's say 7 hours. So therefore, it would separate the song by that part of the file name. However, most of the databases are actually using these two. the artist separation and the title separation, so that therefore you don't get the same artist too close to itself. You don't wind up with a pile of them to be able to do that. Now, there is an override that the announcer on air can use if they're putting in their own material, and in that they can then defeat that to be able to work with it. But normally in that stage they would be running the system that you have, and they'd be inserting their own material into that. The title separation is identical to that. Now, this is where John was sort of talking about the technicalities that you can actually have with these files. And there are some things which should be watched pretty closely on the way through to be able to make sure that this actually does occur. If I ring in track. Okay. It'll take long to run that. Now, you've got the track tool there, have you?
No, still creator.
No, that's okay. Good. It appears if I get a main screen each time that we're successful. So now these are the songs, but in this case, this is the tag. Now, the tag system varies. As John was telling me, there are some variations which are through different systems and different compression systems that change. If it's looking at this as being the artist, it will separate that, but this is in the tag, this is in an MP3 file, so this is the tag that is the artist, and this is what I've told this program to use for the separation. There is always the chance that you wind up with a duet. In the duets, there are separation rules where you can have a list of the main artist and associated artists, and it will still separate them by whatever gap you have. The titles are difficult. In many ways, there are things like, say, the Beatles' Help. Could be an acoustic version, it could be an orchestral version, there could be a live performance. Each one of those is exactly the same song. What I've done there is I've turned around and changed the title area so that the title represents the song's name only, whereas in the other side, it may contain the information about it being live. So I've left it in here so the announcers can see if it's a live version or something similar to it. So that then makes certain that I get separation within these areas too. So this is another thing that within each of the systems makes certain that the filing is correct. There are a large number of programs that are available that are very good at being able to help you with this. There is one called MP3 Tag. It's a very, very versatile program and can be used in association with other programs to give you even bigger and better results to it. The other one that's rather good is a bulk rename utility. And this can be very helpful in things like your sponsor announcements. If they want a certain number of sponsorships and they want them rotated in a certain order, you can always change the names of the files slightly to be able to guarantee that you're going to get that variation. These other columns here, I won't guarantee them being in other software. In this case, it does a calculation whereby the lower level of the track, when you start to play a track on air, normally a live DJ would look at it and see if it's low. If it's too low and they're cross-fading, then you have that hollow on air between the two tracks. So what you try and do is to find, either turn it up and let it run, or find a spot a bit further in on the music track to be able to guarantee that you're going to get that cross. So in here, they've given you the option of what sort of level you want it to start at. It will find that, and that's where it will start playing from. This point here is where it's fading, and that will start the next track after that. These figures here have nothing to really guarantee them working with any other system. These are the two really essential ones in this particular area. Replay gain on the technical side, I've had problems with. I don't know whether John has. Have you? No?
John's been having some trouble.
With his connections.
Yeah.
My internet keeps falling over.
Yeah.
Well, what I was just asking about there is with a lot of these systems these days that these level changes don't work terribly well. So you've got to try and work with changes. And some people now have gone for this replay gain, which is like Apple are using or have been using it from the very start with iTunes, so that it looks at one frequency in the particular song, say 3K or 6K, and then turns them all up or down according to that. So every song sounds the same all the way through. And this one has that feature, but it's something that a lot of people don't really know what it's about and can really make quite a mess of it, to be honest. Have you found that too?
Yeah, look, in terms of level management, one of the things that I guess 10 years ago, what we would do is run every track through a process called variously normalization. And the idea of that was that on ingest, you would set the track so that it was approximately the same level as every other track. And that meant that when you push the fader up on the panel, the meters would always be reading much the same on every track coming out of the automation system. In fact, the techniques that were used sort of 10 years ago really didn't do normalization in terms of how loud something was, but more try to make everything maximum peak energy. Might have achieved a similar result, but these days there is a process of normalization that is related to loudness. This is what all the TV stations do, by the way, so that program is balanced to be equally loud from track to track. And that means that a heavy metal track, a track with a harpsichord in it, an ad, a thing with glockenspiels, which has very high instantaneous energy, but not much actual volume, but can all be processed so that they are actually the same loudness. And if you were listening to these tracks coming out of the automation system without any gain control, without your station's audio processing, they would already be at roughly the same or exactly the same perceived loudness. As a separate topic, but a major consideration for bringing music into your automation system.
Yeah, where I've started using it now, not only in this sort of situation, is in programs like Adobe, whereby you've got a whole series of pieces that you're going to put together. The music, voice tracks, all of them have now been assembled within the program. If you do a process like this, whereby doing the loudness work on it, you will find that it's much easier to be able to do the edit, because a lot of those sounds now are very similar. It won't fix the final product, but your editing time is reduced remarkably by using those to be able to fix those kind of situations ahead of time. It takes a while to get used to it, but it's certainly one of the things now that has to be taken into account. There are some very bad programs that do it, that change the levels substantially and leave them that way. There are other programs like the Apple one and some of the other Windows ones where the information is stored in the file itself as part of the tag, and the process itself is then monitored by the player that you're using, but they use that tag information rather than relying upon changing the file itself. By changing the file, you wind up with the sorts of problems that the track is not the way it would be originally, and therefore it's a little bit harder to juggle the work that you're working with in those situations. Now, still no questions?
Let's have a quick look. Okay. Nothing. We've got Felipe says MP3 tag is very handy, and John Vincent says Hindenburg editing has auto loudness built in.
That's it. Yes, same principle. Works well. Works very, very well. Okay, now what we've got to look at is how people can bring things in like news services and other items like that. There is a whole heap of different versions of can I bring in, let's go back to the basics. Now, talking with some of the stations with the news services and relayed programs, as in Cairns FM, I was there this morning going through their system. They record everything. So even the news services are actually broadcast 1 hour later. They all go into one bin, and then it just goes and calls that particular file and runs that particular file each time. So that could be, well, like I know that Larry's online, and Larry does a program which is a council type program which therefore needs to be updated each week. And he simply puts the new file into that one, and it's then picked up by the automation system. So that's a continuous system that most of the people who do updated programs can use and be able to transfer it from home or from anywhere else via something like Dropbox into the system, and the system will then pick it up at that particular point of time. So if I go into rotations, for example, schedules is easier. So now I need to bring that screen up. I'm getting used to this now. So in here with these, you can have what is called a break note. And the break note has a whole heap of things in it. And every particular program, this is very, very similar across all of the platforms that I've looked at. So in here, most of them have time markers, and they will either supply with or sell you a set of times. They're usually the hour and the second and then the minutes. And the system itself combines both of those to be able to tell the time during your program to make it sound live. The same thing occurs with the temperature. So you'd probably record a weather for yourself when you left the building. I know that one station does this. The drive announcer records the weather for the first half of the evening, and they do a simple thing that doesn't say anything terribly complex about what's going to happen in the next 24 hours, but they also are able to put a temperature onto it, which certainly makes it feel very, very much like it is a really live program. This one even goes to the stage of changing which one of they're on. The commercial breaks, now this is more for the live situation where you can say that your bracket is going to be 2.5 minutes or whatever else you particularly want to do. So let's go, say, 90s. In there, it will then give you a time that you need to fill to be able to make that work. These are breakpoints to be able to bring things in through serial ports and other things, the things of the techies like John will be able to tell you now better ways of these things being operated and the way that they would change. In here, they do give you the options of being able to put in requests. Now, I don't know of too many systems that actually do this. The way that this one works is that on your website, you can have a list of the songs that you would allow as requests. The listener can then click on that. It then comes back into a file on the computer. And when the request spot comes in, it will select one of those and play them. So you can have external information input from your audience. Instant song requests are basically the same. Now, the top-up folders, let's say you run out of tracks. You might have country programs going up against jazz programs, going up against house music programs. So if you're saying, if this hour runs short, this is what I want to put in there to fill that short hour. Very rare, I normally go over one, so it will drop one. But this will then give you a folder in here that you can use to be able to tell the program to fill the hour with a certain type of music. The search folders, this is more for an input stage in a live situation where you can search for spots to be able to put them in. Carts, simple, basically the same as we used to do, whereby you can specify what cart numbers will be played, but you can work those through with your scheduling systems just as well, so I very rarely use it. So let's say if we're going to change the top-up folder, so we say for this hour we're going to be using this PC, C drive, and we're going to fill it with tracks from the 60s. Then the next hour you can change that over as well. You can also use this to trigger your program. Again, it depends on the program you have. In this particular one, you can turn around and change the size of the print and the color of the screens to overcome problems for people with eyesight problems, or maybe just color problems, basically, with systems, so that they can change it. So that this will then tick over, be able to change the whole of the screen for that particular session and operator, so that it works that way. And it will change the readouts as well. So this gives you all of this flexibility. Every one of these things can be altered during the program, and you can put that in as an instruction. So if I say change that, and I go OK, and I say I want it to occur so it then goes in here, and it specifies that at that time it will make that change, and you can run that over the whole day to be able to make those sorts of changes. Now, the next stage, which I think has become very important, is now the interaction of your radio station with the internet. A lot of people now are streaming their information and going for podcasts. With the streaming situation, it's excellent. We are just finishing our server, otherwise I'll be able to show you tonight that on the screen, our radio site screen, it will show what song is playing now, what the next song will be, and I think the one after that as well. So the people can visually see what you're doing. It's very important when you're putting your tracks in to make sure that the tags with the title and the artist are correct, because that is what the audience will see. What we do when we're running maybe as radio special is change that and make sure it's titled as radio special for the Beasts interviewer Peter Gill, so that there's no music running in that time, but people are still fully aware visually as to what you've got on the screen. These screen displays can also be used as a sales point too. So it's like an extension, so that if a track comes up and it has a new artist on it, there's no reason why you can't include links to the artist's site and to the marketing that you've actually got. You can therefore increase the sales potentials that you have through your website, through streaming situations. And this is what we're working on now, so that we can combine the radio station and the actual websites to be able to make it a full unit. We're going to be able to sell both of those in one hit to the marketplace. But we also be giving us that extra push for people to be able to use them on their phones, because obviously on the phone they're using data, whereas if they're using one of the wireless configurations, which you can do to most phones, and most of them have got a receiver in them, but you've got to use software to get it, so that you're still totally flexible in the marketplaces that you're working with. This, of course, allows you to go through to your podcasting stages as well, to be able to work that further extension upon what you can sell and work with. So we're now trying to work our way through, not saying we're just running a radio station, but we're running a marketing concern which will use these tools that we have through the internet and through programming, and combining both of those into one element to be able to make things work for us in every possible way. Still nothing up there? I thought I would have...
What are we seeing? Okay. John Mazels is asking, how long can we run this? Craig Wright has a question.
Yep.
He says, was wondering if we wanted a fresh start, what kind of time commitment would be needed for file management, maintenance for consistent naming, tagging, etc.? So
I've done it in 3 days on 2,500 tracks.
3 days. There we go. Okay.
Actually, but you see, then I would jump in and say, how long is a piece of string? So depending on the system you're going from and to, depending on how much metadata you want to carry across, depending on whether the metadata is, and by metadata I mean things like, title, artist, some of the separation information that Peter talked about, when the vocal starts, where the fade point is, all of that sort of stuff that's associated with the track. Is that embedded in the track, or is it embedded in a database, and can it be converted from one system to another? So you might be able to do a complete conversion in 2 or 3 days, provided that you spend several weeks planning the process. So it's really, how long is a piece of string?
Once you start to get into it, it becomes far simpler. This is the tag program that I told you about. So that in here, these 2 items, so that your titles can be used to create the file name by going that way. You can select the combinations of the artists or whatever you want in whatever order you would like to present them.
Yeah.
In our station, for example, we've been putting the title of the song first, but that's not really the convention these days. The main convention now is to be able to have the artists first and be able to sort them by that category. In here, you can select as many as you like and turn around and make a change in the artist section and you can change every one of those. So that if you wind up with a good example that we got caught with last week was REM. So somebody put in R space E space M. Somebody else had put in R dot. Somebody had run all three symbols together. So therefore the system did not know that it was a duplicate artist, and therefore it was likely to play the two songs by that particular artist in a limited period of time. And that got us thinking big time about making more checks on what we had.
And there's no system on Earth that was actually going to fix that problem for you. That's about station rules, and you need to be controlling the people who are doing cataloging to say, well, when you catalog information, here's how that information needs to go in order to ensure that we don't get duplications or conflicts.
Exactly. But I find with these sorts of programs, it works exceptionally well to be able to sort out what you need. And these ones, you can add all these other fields to it too that you were talking about, so that you can duplicate information across fields as well. And this is a freebie, been around for a long, long time, and it's very, very flexible.
Let me maybe just do a quick technical thing. Sharon asked the question, is that the same as tag and rename? What Peter has been dealing with and been showing you is a process for embedding metadata in the actual file name of the file. Now I'm looking at some files in front of me which have the name 00001, 00002, 00003. There is nothing about the file that tells you what it is. But Pete, can I grab the screen for a second?
Yeah, go for it. Yes.
Sure. So I'll just show you here. Actually, I need to make sure that, Geordie, you're about to say something,
yes,
aren't you?
I was just going to say, it is 7:30, but we're fine to go on for another 15 minutes or so.
Okay.
If people do have to leave, feel free to leave the room. It'll be recorded, so you can come back and watch the end of it later. We're just running over a little because we realise it's a complex conversation tonight, so it's probably going to go for a little bit longer.
So I'll just show you here. I went to my disk, and this is my favorite disk management tool, a thing called Total Commander. The great thing about Total Commander is I can go to any file and I can say, all right, show me that file. It opens up a browse window. So there, in fact, is a hexadecimal representation of what's in that file. It happens to be an audio file, and if I positioned over, let's see, something that it could recognize as an MP3, and I do the same thing, now you might not be able to hear that in the background, but it's actually opened up a player window in which it's playing that track for me. But if I say, go and tell me what's in the file, I don't actually want to know. Now, it's inconveniently reopening the files, not on the screen that I'm sharing. This is what the file looks like inside, and I can say, all right, give me a different representation of that. This is an audio file, and if I go right down to the bottom, it just goes, it's like this gobbledygook collection of bits until you get to the end. But there are other ways of using inside the files. So, for example, Peter talked about some tagging. This is an MP3 file in which up here there is some information. You can just see where it says lane 3. That's actually a bit of metadata buried in the front of the file that says this was done with the lane 3 encoder, which is one of the classic encoders. Here's another MP3 file, and the program I used to create this put even more header data in there. So this now says, okay, here's the ID, here is the person who created it. It was called My 70s Radio Imaging. That was actually the name of the file. It was created with Adobe Audition. So this again is even more information that is buried at the front of the file. Your audio codec, the replay device in the automation system, is going to ignore all that. Well, it certainly doesn't need to play that out or try to play it. It's going to ignore it in terms of any audio. But depending on the automation system, it may be able to reach into the file and automatically extract this data. And in fact, I found an extreme case. So if I show you this one, this is a case where the ID3 contains an amazing amount of XML data, that runs and runs and runs until the actual file starts. So down here somewhere, these will be probably hexadecimal zeros, and then the audio starts. And I even found a file which I played a little bit of before, and this was showing, okay, this is a RIF format file which identifies to the codec, and there's an amazing amount of zeros. I had to come down quite a way. Here we go. And this is where the actual audio starts. And all that happens is when you play that file, the piece up to this buried inside the file. And then what Peter has showed you is a technique for creating some human readable metadata as part of the file name. But, different automation systems use file name information and the buried metadata information in different ways. The most complex systems tend to not put anything in the file name. It's just an arbitrary number with a file stored on disk, and everything else is stored entirely separately in a database where it can be looked up and manipulated by the automation system and by multiple users using the automation system.
Mm-hmm. That was what we were talking to about backup. We haven't mentioned that. Do you want to do that quickly?
Yes, you should have backup. That's actually a major topic, but I'm talking to you as somebody who yesterday morning had the solid state disk in my laptop died, and the only reason I'm even talking to you at the moment is because 8 hours before that, I had taken a full backup of the machine, and I was able to do a complete restore, which was like miraculous. For backup, two things that are really important for any automation system. One is make sure that all your important files, the database, the music files, everything else, is in at least two places. And that is probably a pair of disks mirrored, so that if one disk fails, the other one keeps going, and that you back all that up to somewhere else as well, preferably somewhere off-site. And the second thing that's important is every so often go and confirm, prove absolutely beyond any shadow of doubt that you can restore your backup to a clean disk. Disks are very cheap these days. A 10 terabyte disk is now costing under $500. A 10 terabyte disk is going to hold somewhere in the order of 12,000 hours of uncompressed audio. Uncompressed. And 12,000 hours of audio, you're talking about a couple of years of playing, I think it's about a year and a half of
Yep.
playing back audio without repeating anything at all. And that's like under $500. A 2 or 3 terabyte disk costs you absolutely nothing these days. And so do you really need to compress your files? You certainly don't need to. You probably shouldn't. And the quality loss of going to a file format like MP3 is pretty significant.
See, for here, I'm only using 4 terabytes, I think, for the backups, and they run every night for me. The machine itself was only a $700 machine, I think. The software was about $800, something like that. And that's the entire radio station operating off one laptop. The complexity these days and the simplicity of it now has become so much more flexible for radio stations.
We've got a couple of questions. I will just go to the first one. This is from Sean for Peter. He said, sounds really great so far. Do you use hooks? And can you please explain how hooks work and how you would use it from within station playlist?
Yes, and hooks are available. I know for a fact now in the one in Simeon. I saw it running the other. Yes, hooks are available.
As in identifying the key part of a track, so you can just listen to it and say, what is this track about?
Well, the ones that I've heard, actually, the Simeon demo on it is very, very good. That includes a lot of those sorts of features. And it's basically an opener here saying, listen on our radio station for, and then there's usually maybe the announcement of the song itself, but then maybe 6 seconds or 3 seconds out of the song. Yeah. And you can nominate those. When you're putting the tracks into the system, you can put the start and finish points for those hooks, and it will go and find them for you.
So when you play the hook of say, We Will Rock You, what you'd expect to hear, you click on hook and it would go, dum, dum, tss, dum, dum, tss, and that's all you need to hear.
That's it. Yes, exactly. And you can random them as well, so that with the right sort of software package, yes, it will then look at your current playlist for that day, not the one that you used yesterday or something you produced last month. It turns around and looks at the current playlist and then picks up those hook lines.
And you would have a little voiceover that runs in before that saying, coming up on 107.9 Live.
All the ones that I heard, they were just the starting saying these are coming up. But then just one word or two words to identify the artist. As I said, it's just, the Simian demo can be downloaded off the internet. It's free, and you can actually hear those demonstrations throughout that, and it's very, very well done. Okay. The program that I'm using at the moment, that one you can download for 30 days, but it doesn't have all of the features. Zara, you can download the free version and use it continuously. A little bit fussier, but it's very workable. So all of those are available for people to play with now. You can just download them once you come offline and work with it.
Great.
By the way, the two ways in which hooks might be used, one is to be able to build up a coming up next automatically, but the other thing is if you're sitting in the studio and you go, what would be a suitable track to play? You can run down your playlist and just go, let me hear the hook, let me hear the hook, let me hear the hook. That's the one I want to use. It's a very fast way that's a very fast way of accessing the material. So, in the short amount of time you've got before the next track, you can go, that one.
Previewing. Good one. Okay, we've got another question from Barry. Barry asks, what about a rotation of the selected music tracks? Say you were to have 300 music tracks over 24 hours. Could you swap hourly blocks of music tracks, for example, from the first hour to the 10th hour for the next day?
Yes, you can. There's no reason why that won't work. You can turn around and specify it. Most of the programs actually have fields in them that allow for dates or times of some description. So you could turn around and say, okay, play it at this time in this one, but on the following day, play it at a different time of day. You can also use that for the type of mood, so that at night time you want ballads or slow songs, or you might want house music for a party for Saturdays. So you can have the one format that you're using for the whole week, but the tags themselves will turn around and make the selections for those sessions.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Sean is just picking up on the hooks again. He asks, are the hooks automatic or do they need to be manually done?
They're programmed in. If we had the time, I could show you the new version of the program I work with. Yes, it has it in, and it is automated. So you say do a hook at this particular point, or 3 hooks, or 4 hooks, or whatever. The hooks are marked on the tracks when you're putting them in. So that's where the time does come in as a problem. You've got to make sure you actually do that, and then it will go through and random select from the hooks that you've marked within a section of your catalogues.
One of the things that I found for ingest was that properly ingesting and cataloging tracks could take twice the length of the track, depending on how the ingesting system works. But if you're ripping off a CD or you're pulling in material from somewhere else and loading a file, there is how long it takes to do the rip or the load, and then how long it takes to get the metadata right. And getting the metadata right is something that you do once. But if you haven't done it properly, the ripple effect of not having that right goes through your entire operation. So spending the time to get the metadata right up front when you're cataloging material is vital.
Our radio station is in a school, so the kids, when they're turning around and ripping stuff, they really don't care about that sort of information. It's a song to play, trying to get that responsibility into them. And with the metadata being right, then you've done all your APRA reports, you've done all your percentages, everything else is there for you, but you've got to do it right in the first instance.
Do you often find, Peter, that it's helpful to have, say, a policy procedure or some kind of written guide for announcers to be able to use it at the level that they need to be using it?
We try to, but as we started out with this particular webinar, with so many different systems and so many different ideas, it is very difficult to be able to do that unless the terminology is explained. If you turn around and say rip, then you've got to say, well, what is ripping? When you turn around and say convert it to a particular format, you've got to say what that format is and how do you get there? How do you work through it? So you've got to go through those procedures. A lot of these programs now are allowing different formats so that you can play Apple files. Mine couldn't do that for ages, but that's now available to be able to do an M4A file, to be able to do OGG, FLAC, all of these other compression files that are very good, but each one's different. So if somebody happens to hit the wrong button in the compression range and doesn't get the tag right, you've got a problem which you've got to go back and sort out afterwards.
Yeah.
So really, I mean, training is kind of key when it comes to then, I guess, if you're going to expand the use of these sort of systems out to general broadcasters.
Yes. There's one manager that I spoke to. He was very, very scared about the system that he had because he felt that nobody else could use it. And so he wasn't transferring that information on to the people or allowing them to do that. But again, it was a particular format. He wanted a particular presentation of meta tags, and he was just not reaching that.
A lot of that comes down to process. You really have to say, how is it that we want to operate the station? If you want to play the game, you're going to obey the following rules. And you sometimes you need to be really draconian about this, because when you pull an APRA report that doesn't have important information because somebody hasn't bothered to put it in, you're putting the station at risk. And people need to understand that it's not just nice to have. This information is important for everybody else downstream of their actions. But once you get past that process, once everybody understands, look, this is the game, I want to play in the sandbox, I have to play the game according to the station rules, everything gets a lot easier.
Right. Okay. Any other questions in the from the group? People are probably needing to head off now. I think we've dropped down. A few people have dropped down. I think we've got all the questions. If you've got any more questions, pop them in. We've got just a couple of minutes left before we'll leave these guys to it. Is there more that you guys want to add for the end of the session?
Well, I wanted to say one thing, just where Peter was talking about voice tracking, and that was when my internet fell apart. But something that I learned very early on is that you don't have to be perfect when you are doing voice tracking in this environment. In fact, in this case, perfection is the enemy of the good. And one of the things that happens, like now, where I'm just talking, I have no idea what I'm going to say, but it's going to sound like I'm communicating and it's going to sound natural. And that's actually what you want to aim for when you are doing voice tracking. So you want to turn the microphone on, you want to say something that makes sense. If it really is crap, go back and record it again. But don't be afraid of the occasional fluff, because that's exactly what you would do on air. And provided that voice track isn't going to be repeated 2,000 times over the next year, those slight imperfections, just like a musician playing a slightly duff note, is what tells you that it's live, and that actually adds to the process rather than detracting from it. So don't be afraid to just turn on the microphone, do the voice track and go, yep, that was okay, move on.
Fantastic advice, because God, I re-record myself over and over again, and I hate
you
it.
probably shouldn't. You probably shouldn't, because you feel like, oh, that wasn't perfect. But in fact, the listeners understand, and the listeners will relate to you when you are talking in a natural way. If it's too perfect, it starts to sound mechanical.
Yeah, it's authentic, and that's definitely one of the reasons people listen to community radio.
And
Peter, anything else from you? Anything else we didn't get to this evening, or wanted to refer people for more info?
Most of the ideas. I just wanted people to realise that automation is not the enemy.
And in terms of some online resources, or if people wanted to do a little bit more research and info, are there some good tutorials or perhaps manuals associated with most of these programs?
No, there isn't. A lot of these programs get changed so frequently that publishing manuals becomes a problem. The software type of manual is the way to actually to run it more than anything else. And some of those are out of date as well. And the changes that they make are very quick. I really would say, well, in the case of what I've got, go to the site, download the demo program. The demo program actually has a wizard at the start of it. It says, where are your music files? Where are your sweepers? And then turns around and produces for you an entire week's program that you can then go in and edit and play with. It's only a 30-day thing, but immediately you've got an idea as to what you can do for yourself in the programming.
Fantastic.
Zara also, you can get the demo version, but there's not a lot of documentation. That is a little trickier. Simeon, that is, I haven't seen all of the back end, but there is a demo version that you can play with that is quite good. So all of these, you can have your own time and feel comfortable with whatever you're going to work with, and then you can work out what you need for your station.
Great advice there, I think, and particularly when, you know, stations can be spending quite, you know, intense resources on this sort of thing. So it's really important to do your homework before you commit to something. That's it for this evening. We've got some people saying thank you very much, and thank you for coming through. Peter, that was fantastic. John, thank you so much. I think you might have one little announcement for us.
I do. I just want to go here and we'll just remind people something that's really, really important, which is Technorama. Well, actually, before I even say that, Geordie, what these sessions, what these webinars are proving is that there's a desire for additional information, and so as Technorama we're looking to see what longer form sessions could we run, and today's discussion has suggested that maybe there's an opportunity to run a full day of either webinar or hands-on training around this topic. That's something that we're going to look at. But coming up in 2 months is Technorama TR19, as I said, running in Campbelltown in Sydney. If you go to the Technorama website, www.technorama.org.au, and you can click through the article that's just at the front. And right now, it's pretty basic, except that it says you can register right now. And if you want to, you can now go and register for TR19 and buy your way into what is the gleaming piece on the schedule for technology training and for the get-together for Australia. So that's there right now. And we are currently putting the program together and finalising that. If you've got something that you want to get off your chest, get in touch with us straight away. Made that point on the page. By the way, and attending Technorama is going to be cheaper if you're a member, and it only costs $10 to join. So join us if you're not already a member.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, we will leave it with that this evening. Thank you very, very much to Peter Gill for your time and your expertise. Thank you once again to John Maisels for facilitating this evening and keeping us on track and throwing in some curly questions there. As I mentioned, we've recorded the session this evening, so a link will go out to where that will be located on our website tomorrow. Along with that will be a short feedback survey. Those feedback surveys are extremely useful for us in getting funding and being able to keep running sessions like that, so we'd really appreciate if you filled in the feedback survey. If you have any other questions, feel free to drop us a line, cmto.org.au, join our mailing list as well, and same goes with Technorama. All right, we'll sign off for this evening. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
I'm stopping the recording.